I'm gonna use this cheap bucket to upgrade my sandblaster. Well, there's probably a few other things we're gonna need as well, but I'll get to that in a minute. Some of you might recall a little while ago I picked up this little benchtop sandblaster off Marketplace for a good price, and it was pretty much brand new in box. I did a review on it and I'll link that up here if you want to check that out. I've been using it for about a year now, and as a sandblaster I am still very, very happy with it. But like I pointed out in the review, there's a lot of dust that seems to seep out from all the seams. The main problem is the amount of dust that builds up inside the cabinet while you're using it. So today I'm going to try and build a dust extraction system so that I can actually see what I'm working on and keep some of that dust out of the air. This sandblaster is set up with a port on the side and one at the back. Now the one at the back is kind of the one that's a bit of a problem. It's mounted on here with this little metal bracket, and inside we have what looks like a scouring pad. And as you can see, it doesn't exactly mount very tight. No surprise, a whole lot of dust ends up coming out from around the outside edges. So my initial thought was, well, I'll just hook a vacuum cleaner up to it, and I went and 3D printed this. It's designed to fit in exactly the same way as the original piece, except it's stepped here, so as you turn it, it tightens into the sandblaster. Then all I needed to do was take my vacuum cleaner and plug it in. Of course, this seemed like a great idea until my vacuum cleaner started making a whole bunch of squealing and screeching noises as the dust went through the hose, into the vacuum, through the filter, and then straight through the motor. So I went out and I picked up this. This is a Cyclone filter, and the idea with this is it uses centrifugal force to take all the junk that's in the air, throw it to the outside where it will spin around, drop down, and into the Home Depot bucket that we're gonna mount down below. Let's get this thing mounted on the bucket, and then we'll work out a way to attach it to the sandblaster and to our vacuum. So first thing I'm gonna do is get our bucket prepped, and I went in the backyard and found the grimiest, grossest bucket that I could find, and that's what I'm gonna use because I'm trying to do this on the cheaps. Now we need to mount our filter on the top, and the filter comes with this little kind of gasket, and that's gonna work great for marking out our template to where we need to drill. Or is it, because it's got this stupid bump on it? That's really annoying. I'm going to have to find a solution for that too. So I'm just going to mark out each one of our holes here. That'll tell me if I've got this at least roughly centered, and it looks like I do. This is kind of cutting through the same spot on all the holes. Next I'm gonna drill out all of these holes first, because if I do this one first, well, I'm gonna lose a lot of rigidity and it might be more difficult to try and drill the bolt holes second. So we'll start with the bolt holes and then we'll try to deal with the middle. Now for the center hole, I'm going to use a hole saw, but you could just as easily do this with a jigsaw or something like that. I'm just gonna use a hole saw because I have it. I'm gonna line that up on center, and hopefully this works. This is completely unnecessary, but I'm doing it because the torch was here. I'm just gonna use it to clean up some of the rough edges from our cut. First thing I'm gonna put on is the gasket, and then the lid. Now, there is still one little problem, and that is this lip right here. So what I've done is I went and printed up this little ring out of ASA plastic, and it's going to sit right on top here. It's not going to be strong enough to flatten out that lip, but I'm just hoping it just kind of gives something more for the bolts to kind of grab onto. So I'm gonna put the washer on, and then these are going to go in through the bottom, and then our flange nut goes on last. And then I'm gonna tighten it down to, let's say 2 ugga-duggas, and we'll see what happens. It might warp it, I don't know. Ooh, okay, so we're gonna go to no ugga-duggas and just kind of snug this down instead, I think. That sounds awful. Let the crackling sound settle. Actually, I think, you know, that'll be just fine. If I made this any thicker, it probably would have failed, but because like I said, it's made out of ASA, so it's got a little bit of flex to it. This would probably be better made out of steel, but again, I'm trying to do this on the real cheap, so 3D printing is gonna have to do for now. If it doesn't work, then I will change it later, but it looks like the gasket is taking up any of the slack, so I think we're gonna be okay there. Okay, so that is on there. It's actually pretty sturdy. And yes, I did use a metric to tighten down those SAE bolts because SAE is stupid. Now, let's figure out how to attach this to the sandblaster and to the vacuum. And that means turning back to our 3D printer. I figured while I was printing the ring, I may as well print a few adapters as well. Thing is, these adapters are not going to be going to vacuum hose because vacuum hose was $80 for a length, and we're doing this on a budget. So what I picked up instead is this. 20 feet of sump pump drain hose. It's corrugated just like vacuum hose, so it's got enough resistance it's not going to collapse. The only problem is it's only 1.25 inches, which means it's a little bit small and we're going to have a little bit of a restriction, but for what we're using this for, I think it's going to be just fine, especially if I use a slightly bigger vacuum cleaner. And this was only $14. The other nice thing about this hose is it's set up so you can cut it at various lengths. I'm going to cut the hose at the very first section because Cyclone's going to be mounted fairly close to the sandblaster. Having a knife that actually has a blade on it would probably be advisable, but this is my last blade, and that's as far as it goes. Our adapters look like this. This one here is going to go into our Cyclone, and this into the back of the sandblaster. Both fittings have a small ridge built into them to lock into this indent on the hose, but we're still going to use the clamp just to make sure everything's tight and minimize leaks. Now all I gotta do is plug in the vacuum, but I'm gonna try and save what little life is left in my little shop back here, and we're gonna use this instead. I think we can get a little more power out of that one. Of course, if I don't empty it out, I know somebody's gonna say, great video, but how do we know if it actually worked? So I'll empty this thing out first, and oh wow. Wow, what is in there? I must have vacuumed out one of the barn find cars with this last. All right, I got this thing emptied and blown out. Same with the filter. It's not completely spotless, but it's at least gonna give us an idea how well the thing works. So let's get this thing plugged in and start sandblasting something. Of course, the shop vac's exhaust still exhausts into the garage, and that means it's going to be throwing particulate into the air no matter what, so still going to be using a respirator. In the future, I'd like to hook up my central vac to this thing, because the central vac actually isn't hooked up to the house anymore. It's just sitting there taking up space, so perfect opportunity to plumb that thing outside and make use of it. But for now, put on a PPE, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start blasting first without the vacuum so you can kind of see what ends up happening with the box, and then we'll turn it on and see what kind of difference it makes. All right, let's go. Is done, but I guess the big question is how well did the vacuum work? So let's have a look at the part first real quick here, just because this thing was pretty rusty. Yeah, like I said, blaster does not a bad job for such a cheap little blaster. Let's have a look at the vacuum though and see how much of that dust and debris went through and made it to the vacuum. Last time I got about halfway through one of these calipers before the vacuum started to make noises and completely clogged up. Okay, well, we definitely have some stuff that's made it through. So that is rust dust, but that's the thing. These Cyclone filters aren't designed to capture the really, really fine stuff. So we're definitely getting some stuff through, but not nearly as bad as without the filter. As for large stuff, there's pretty much no sand at the bottom. So let's take a look in the bucket and see how much it actually caught. There's actually quite a bit in there, so Cyclone definitely works not too bad, at least for most of the heavier stuff. It caught quite a bit of the fine particulate, but we do know we're still getting some all the way through. So this is obviously a massive improvement over just hooking the vacuum up to this thing straight or running no vacuum at all. However, even though we're catching most of the particulate, some of the fine stuff is still making it through, as we can see by the rust on the filter. I'm gonna have to plumb that exhaust outside, but that's gonna be a later project. That does bring up though why I opted to go with this style Cyclone instead of one of the ones that just simply replaces the lid. Even though those ones are lower profile and maybe a little bit easier to store, the whole idea with the Cyclone is it's using centrifugal force to throw that particulate to the outside. The tighter the radius, the more force you have on the particulate, and the more particulate you're going to capture. A sandblaster obviously makes very, very, very fine particles, so I wanted to give it the best chance of being thrown to the outside and into the bucket that I possibly could, and that's why I opted to go with this unit. Now if you do want to build the setup, I'm going to link all the parts I used down below, and if you want all of the attachment pieces, well, I'll put these things up on the website. Anyways, hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.